That are about reckoning with complicated histories. I'm working on a new book right now called The Good Boss Project, and this one's coming from a really passionate place. It's coming from something that I've been wondering about for years when I teach MBA students at the NYU Stern School of Business, when I speak with people in organizations. I'm constantly struck when I tell them I teach students how to be good bosses. And more recently, I'm writing a book about how to be a good boss. What do you imagine is the first thing they say to me? They immediately start to tell me about the worst boss they ever had. I tell them I'm thinking a lot about good bosses, and they tell me about their bad bosses. And it's universal. I've noticed it across industries, across sectors, and across generations. And this has just been puzzling me. Why is it so hard to find good bosses? Many of us have had good bosses, but it seems that many of us have not, or most of our bosses haven't been. I'm a behavioral scientist who's interested in the workplace, so this is a question that I think about over and over again. And so, today we're going to explore this question of why aren't there more good bosses, and I have a theory and a proposal of what we can do about it and what, in fact, we have to gain. What sacred work, what joyful work might lie on the other side of that. Now, this, by the way, Work Human Live 2025 in Denver, Colorado, is the debut of this talk. This is the first time I'm doing it in front of a big public audience. It is based off of a book I'm writing right now. So the reason I'm putting this up here, you're going to see it again at the end. You don't need to fill out the survey yet because you haven't seen the talk yet. But at the end, I will be truly interested in what landed for you or didn't land for you in these stories and tools that I'm going to share. Because, as I said, I am writing the book as we speak, and so you are the best pressure test of what would work in your workplaces. And there will, of course, be a fun raffle based off of those who give feedback for a signed copy of my previous books and to be acknowledged in the next one, The Good Boss Project. So that's just foreshadowing of what's coming. Let's get to a conversation that I was eavesdropping on. As I mentioned, I'm interested in the workplace. I study what people do in organizations. So there's nothing more interesting for me than eavesdropping on a conversation between two people about work. In this particular case, it was a Zoom meeting. And the Zoom meeting was about to begin, and the employee that I was on the same side of was talking to a friend and saying, I'm really dreading this meeting. I know I'm gonna get yelled at. I didn't know how to do this project. I'm completely overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, what if she fires me? With dread, this overwhelmed employee logs on, and I'm feeling vicarious dread as she logs on, wondering what is going to happen when the boss realizes this swirl of emotion, of worry, of confusion is what's going to confront her. The Zoom meeting begins, and I learned that the boss's name is Minji, and the employee's name is Maya. And Minji asks Maya to update her on the progress of the project. And Maya stammers out this update, that update. She's clearly not confident. She's clearly ready to sort of hand it off and ask to be saved. And instead of saving her, what's interesting is Minji asks her more questions. Sometimes I notice she even allows a little bit of silence while Maya is stumbling to let her search for what was the analytical framework, what was the result you were trying to get to. Because Minji clearly has business goals, quarterly goals that she's speaking of that are important, a bottom line that she needs to hit. It sounds like it's sort of a small to medium-sized company from what I can gather. And as she's clearly articulating her expectations and the business results, she's also asking questions. Well, what did you consider before you got stuck? What were some options that you might consider again? What was your underlying assumption when you ran that analysis? They weren't gotcha questions, they were genuine questions. And as the conversation went on, I started to notice something happen. Maya, this person who was so hunched over and swirly, starts to sit up, starts to gain some confidence. And by the end of the Zoom meeting, what I noticed is that she knew all along what to do. Maya didn't come in thinking she knew what to do, but with the help of some coaching and some questions, she develops a solution. I also noticed something interesting about Minji, the boss. Minji, who had referred at the beginning of the call something about back-to-back meetings, a busy day, I noticed that busy as she was, she stayed with this conversation. And I was wondering, being a boss myself, she probably could move this along a little bit faster. She's probably not allowing herself enough time before her next back-to-back because she's staying with this conversation. And I'm wondering why she's not just telling Maya what to do. By the end of the call, I realized why. Minji had a hunch all along Maya could figure this out. Minji had a hunch all along there was something invisible to Maya that she could see. And that if she could stay with her in that growth process, she could get her there. And in fact, by the end, Maya's ready to go and Minji is off the hook because now I realize Minji isn't going to be the go-to the next time. Maya is going to know what to do. Maya has grown. And Minji has had a good day. I can tell by the sound of her voice. This is what a good day sounds like. It's meaningful work. It's driving towards a business result that matters. It even feels a little bit sacred. Like she took somebody and helped them grow into themselves. As I think about that good day that Minji had, I wonder why there aren't more people, more bosses taking that approach. There's lots of ways to be a good boss, but one of the ways is to help someone grow into being as capable and high-performing as possible. To not have them be dependent on the boss. So why doesn't that happen more often? One of the things I notice when I teach my students is that they come in with an expectation of what it means to be a boss. In their expectation of what it means to be a boss, there's this particular mental model of what a good boss looks like. I'm curious if you see a pen on your table, and if we might use this pen to explore that mental model. Hunt around, see if you can find it. It might be any sort of color. And I see some of you have found it. If yours has a little white tab in it, feel free to pull the white tab out. That'll activate. Where's my friend Melvin, who I was speaking with earlier? There you are, Melvin. Melvin, could you, and you don't have a microphone, so you're going to have to project. Could you tell us what is this little gadget? You're going to have to yell. It's got a little light, it's a little lightsaber. So if he says it's got a little lightsaber, that's great. A table with a microphone. What else do you notice about this pen? You have a microphone? Go for it. Okay, who's got my microphones? Y'all have a microphone right there? If you don't want it, you can pass it back. It's invisible ink. It's invisible ink. Who's talking? Raise your hand. Great, thank you. Invisible ink. So, if you haven't already tried, you've got a little card in the center of the table. You can grab that card and write on the back. Try it out. And then take Melvin's lightsaber and see if you can see what you wrote.
That's really funny. I need to get this
All right, it looks like you've got to the bottom of it. So, my question for you as we explore invisible ink and the spy pen, and I'm going to need my tables with microphones to help us out with this, what does being a good boss have to do with invisible ink? I've got a mic here and a mic here. Go for it, just talking to that mic.
I probably shouldn't have volunteered to speak, but I'm thinking it has something to do with the connection between the invisible ink and the light illuminating it, and that as leaders, sometimes we default to jumping in, fixing, and prescribing what the path is for people, when there might be an opportunity to slow down and help illuminate for them the solutions on their own through more of a coaching approach.
I love that. I love that. So what you're saying is like the coach can be the light, or the manager could be the light that helps the employee. That's fantastic. Thank you for speaking, even though you regretted it. You can pass the mic to the table behind you. Any other sort of theories? What's fun thing about metaphors is you can usually come up with 100 different ways. We've got some hands over here. If you got a mic, go for it.
Just gonna say, like, nobody's a mind reader.
Nobody's a mind reader. And so connect that to the pen for us.
You can think you're communicating, but like communicating, providing context and coaching, like being able to shine the light for people.
Yeah.
It's a part of the process to be a good leader.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's great. You can pass the mic to the table behind you. Actually, someone has a hand behind you. You can pass the mic to them. Tell us how you see invisible ink connecting.
What this brought for me was that I think good leaders have done for me is given a moment of delight, even in like when things are hard. If I can have that little surprise or that little like, oh my gosh, I said something I didn't before.
And wait, what was the moment of delight for you here?
Figuring out what the pen does.
Okay.
when someone at my table, because it also made me connect with someone at my table, I was like trying to figure out how to open it, and she taught me how to, what's your name? Carly taught me how to use the pen, and a whole world of possibility opened.
I love that. And if we could stay with you, I know a whole world of possibility. Well, so think about, you just mentioned, you thought about bosses that had given you a moment of delight. What does that look like in your, if you don't mind giving us an example?
Well, I lean heavily into the knowing and puzzling, and I'll tangle myself up in my own mind trying to understand everything that's going on. So moments of delight for me sometimes look like, here, stand over here and tell me what you see from this perspective. And when I'm able to shift where I'm standing or what I think I'm looking at, that brings delight and joy. I don't know, I think of like when you stand in, what are those pictures called? And if you stand real close and then you run away, you can see the thing.
So you've had bosses that have helped you see things from different perspectives.
Yeah, and that makes sense, and that is delightful.
Thank you so much. You can pass the mic to another table behind you. So we've got all these ways in which good bosses can shine a light, can be a light, can see a light. We've got so many different ways to think about this. And I actually keep one of these on my desk. I keep both for the moment of delight it offers, as well as a reminder for all the things I can't see. We've talked so much this week and heard so much this week about listening, about empathy, about curiosity, about radical forms of all of those things. And I think this light and this ink allows us to think about that in lots of different ways, as we just heard at least 3 different examples. If we keep the mics going, can we hear at least 2 more examples of good bosses you've had and what they specifically did that reminds you of this light and this invisible ink? Okay, we can pass the mic right there. I've got a hand up right here, yep.
I would say that they see the potential and then they challenge challenge you and support you to get there.
Can you remember a specific example, like what exactly, this was a movie, what would we see them doing with you?
I would say that it was when I was quite early on in my career, recruitment coordinator. He was a recruiter. Didn't really know how I wanted to progress my career, but he was probably within his like 40 years of employment and everything, so he had a lot more of a vision of what was potential, and that's how I got into more of a business partner role, because he started to coach me, he started to ask me about what my interests were, and he saw a light in me that I didn't really see in myself at that time, and it guided me on the path into a career that I have today.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. We'll take one more example. You've got a mic, go for it.
So for me, as my boss currently, she knows me, the whole me. She asks questions that I wouldn't think of sometimes myself, and she does that both personally and professionally. I can tell she genuinely shows up and genuinely cares about me both professionally and personally, and I see that every single week. She's consistent.
Amazing. So we've got these examples that start a legacy, just like Minji, you can imagine, was starting a legacy of what it means to show up as a good boss, what it means to shine a light, what it means to foster growth. So again, the question is, why aren't there more people doing this? That's the puzzle. Well, part of the answer lies in the psychology of it. I'm a social psychologist, a behavioral scientist by training. I'm fortunate, by the way, to have one of my former students here in the audience today who lives in the Denver area. Lindsay Melky is sitting right here. Lindsay, give them a big wave. Lindsay, can I brag about you for a second? Lindsay is currently Chief of Staff for Adams County, which is the county we're sitting in right now. She's had incredible roles in the private sector and the public sector, and no big deal, she used to be a Black Hawk helicopter pilot serving in combat. So students like Lindsay have helped me over the years see something, and I'm going to take you in a time machine to help illustrate what I've noticed in both my students and myself. So, you ready for the time machine? Because we're going to the 90s. Oh yes. Oh yes. Here we are, folks. Yes, that's me. Those are glamour shots. Yeah. Well, for those of you clapping, did your mother trick you to go into the mall to get those glamour shots? She did, you're nodding. Yes, my mother tricked me. It was a complete trap. I had no desire to get these glamour shots. They were taken under duress, and it was my ride home. She, by the way, I counted the other day, there's still 3 of these framed in my parents' house. They're still up. Okay, so we're back in the time machine, the time of glamour shots, and I'm a young adult, and I'm an athlete, I'm a college athlete, and I sort of unexpectedly am asked to take over an organization that I was part of that worked with paired NCAA athletes with young people in the community, a big sister, big brother program. This is me as an athlete, and by the way, I look at this picture and I remember worrying so much about my body at that age, worrying about weighing too much. And now I'm like, what was I thinking? What do we do to ourselves when we think about body image? The program I was in as an athlete, it was a high stakes program because there were children, young children being paired with these varsity athletes, and we were setting up a variety of community programs for them. And I unexpectedly got put in the executive director role for this program. It was my first time being a boss, and I really wanted to do this well. And I also really, really wanted the people who were essentially reporting to me, the other much cooler athletes, like the football players, to take me seriously. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a boss. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to make minute by minute agendas. I'm going to print them out so everybody has a copy of our minute by minute agenda. Then I'm also going to prepare a to-do list for each person. Will have their own customized to-do list with a timetable of when their items should be completed by. Then they will think I'm a good boss. How do y'all think that went? They were gracious in their dismissal of me, but they dismissed me, and very rightfully so, because I approached that as if I had a mental model of being a boss, that it was a ladder, that I had somehow climbed this ladder. I hadn't really climbed it, it was sort of fallen in my lap, but I was at the top of the ladder, and my job was to deliver expectations and deliverables to other people. And I had the title, and I had the authority, and therefore everyone would listen to me. And I notice in my students, when we run simulations in class, I often assign them randomly to different roles, sometimes putting some of them in the boss role and some of the employee role. I notice, and many of these students, I teach MBA students, they're in their late 20s, early 30s. Many, and they have incredible work experience, like Lindsay. I noticed a number of them approached being a boss the way I did as well, as if they had climbed a ladder and their job was now to deliver directives to others. We're not alone in this. Professor Linda Hill, in her research that she's done over several decades on new managers and that transition of going from individual contributor to being a manager, she finds time and time again people speak of the pain they are surprised to experience when they become a boss. That this role that they had been striving for, the title, the recognition, the pay bump, maybe a different office, maybe some sort of symbol that would come with it, maybe a direct report, maybe a different position on an org chart, maybe access to certain meetings, maybe decision rights they didn't used to hold. That while all of that was true, it didn't necessarily guarantee that the people who worked for them were going to buy into what they were asking for. That this painful journey into being a boss could in fact reveal that we're missing something in our understanding of what it means to be a boss. That we're not seeing the spy pen version of it, that we're not seeing the Minji version of it, we're seeing the ladder version of it. So when we think about what makes it hard to be that kind of boss, to be that kind of boss and that kind of boss and the Minji kind of boss, let's do a quick exercise. Some of you may have seen this one before. If you were in Eric Bailey's talk yesterday, he did a different version of it. We're going to do it together. We're going to say out loud, let me get you I'm going to flash on this screen over here, a little pointer. We're going to say out loud the color, green, red, purple. We're going to say it in unison together as fast as we can go, following my tracker. If you're able to recognize these colors. If you're not, that's fine. Just come along for the ride. Here we go. Green.
Red, purple, green, blue, blue, yellow, blue, red, purple, green, yellow, red, purple.
You're crushing it. Let's keep going.
Green, red, purple, green, blue, yellow, red,
I love it. I know some of you are still going. You're like, I stayed to the last day of this conference. I will get to the last slide. There was a Stroop task, and in the Stroop task, we're able to see what happens when two automatic processes conflict in our minds. One tries to override the other, it can't, and therefore we stumble. In fact, what we were having to do in this moment is unlearn something. We were trying to unlearn reading. The thanks perhaps from an adult, a teacher, a parent, a sibling somewhere became an automatic process. And in fact, unlearning is harder than learning. We can more quickly acquire knowledge than lose knowledge and reacquire knowledge. And so when we think about being a boss and becoming a boss, and we think about the ladder model that so many of us, that when we go back in the time machine, that's how I approached it when I teach my students, that's what I see them. Wherever that came from, perhaps bosses we've had before, perhaps what we see in the movies and in TV of what it means to be a boss, unlearning that version of being a boss becomes one of our first challenges. And when we think about why aren't there more good bosses, the puzzle that I'm obsessed with, when we think about why it isn't easy, part of it is that we're unlearning as we do it. What else? For this one, we're going to do a little bit of practice. In the middle of your table, where you found your pens, you'll also find a little card. There's a little take-home toolkit for you, but we're going to use the back of the card, the blank side first, and you're going to want your spy pen again. So here's how we're going to start. You're going to face a neighbor, or if there's 3 of you, that's fine, but basically somebody, you should be looking at somebody seated near you. You're going to take the card, we're going to get silly, stay with me. You're going to put that card on your forehead. So it's facing your partner, and I'm seeing a typo in my slide, I'm sorry for that. It should be, so the blank side is facing your partner. The blank side should face your partner. You should see everybody with cards on there. Yeah, don't make, I like how y'all just watched me being silly, but y'all just sat there without, no, we're doing this together. Okay, you got it on your head? Now, this is where it gets tricky. You're gonna take your spy pen, you're gonna very agilely remove the top. You got your spy pen, and do this fast, it's a speed task. Draw a capital letter E on your forehead. Looking at your partner, capital letter E on your, not actually on your forehead, on your card, on your forehead. Okay, you got it? Now, hand your card to your partner. Let them read what you wrote with their spy pen.
Oh, you did a really good job.
Hand the card to your partner.
No, you nailed it. Oh. This is great. Oh, right. That's funny.
How many of you, when you drew your E, how many of, whoops, I went one jar too fast. How many of you drew a E that was sort of right side for your partner? Or, let me say this correctly. How many of you drew an E like this? Okay, how many of you drew an E like this? Could someone with a microphone articulate what you see as the difference between doing a forward versus backwards E in this exercise? Who has my microphones? Raise your hand if you can articulate what you see as the difference.
I'm surprised the others.
Yeah, right there. You can hand the mic there. Thanks. You can just turn it on in the middle.
I looked at it.
Hello.
I'm gonna do it the right way, but I wanted to do it the way. I thought I
Yeah,
said it
I know. So I think the difference was thinking from the other person's perspective and you're like the drawing.
Yeah. And which way did you draw yours, if you don't mind us asking, from your perspective or your other
From
perspective?
the other person's, because I had that perspective and I'm going to show it to someone else.
You were
Because we look
thinking
at-
about their perspective. And in fact, that is exactly the difference. That if we draw the E from our own perspective versus the other person's perspective, it gives us a little bit of insight of, in that moment, whose perspective were we thinking of. Now, here's what's interesting about being a boss. What studies show is that when we have power over someone else, we are less likely to take their perspective. When we're in a position of lower power were actually more likely to do perspective taking. In fact, they've literally done the letter E study, the draw on your forehead, and seen exactly this effect. But it shows up in other ways too. That the person higher in power will be less skilled in that moment of noticing emotional cues in others. They'll just notice less visual things about what's happening, and vice versa for the person lower in power. And this asymmetry in how power is distributed in any relationship, whether it's formal or informal power, has a real impact on how we think about our role as a boss. Because if our tendency is to take our own perspective, not every time, not everybody, but on average, if we're more likely to be thinking from our own perspective than someone else's perspective as we gain power, that has a real implication for how we think about our role as a boss, how we think about the pen, how we think about the ladder, how we think about our role in terms of fostering growth. So the psychology here is not working in our favor. It's not a critique, it's not an insult, it's just a reality of human nature. That the psychology of hierarchy and power makes being a good boss extra hard. That we've got to turn the wheel away, knowing that we're working against our own minds in that moment. So we've got now some insight into the psychology that prevents us sometimes from stepping into a role that Minji, I sensed, was really enjoying. A growth zone where the employee that she was working with was growing, and where Minji herself was growing as a manager, where the legacy I imagined she was leaving was going to show up not just in that employee, but in everyone that employee would manage in the future. And so this growth zone, this zone of legacy, is what we want to explore next. And I want to tell you a story about an employee named Letitia. Letitia loved her job, loved her boss, loved her team, looked forward to going to work. And then one day, out of nowhere, she works for a big local company, she gets notification that her boss wants to urgently speak with her in person. And she's traveling for work when she gets this notification. She's confused. He knows I'm traveling for work. How can he speak with me in person? She figures out how to connect with him, figures out how to meet up in person as soon as possible, and is told that she's being moved to a different team. Different boss, different team, different role, and by the way, effective Friday. She's stunned. She's a high performer. She had wondered when she originally got this notification that, is she being fired? But no, she's being moved to a different team. And the more she thinks about it, the more upset she is about it. This isn't a role she wants. She's going from working with an in-person team to a virtual team that's not co-located, with a boss she sort of knows but doesn't really know, doing work that's unfamiliar to her. She's really upset about it, and she's a high performer who knows she has options. She decides to send a note to the new boss. They have a phone call, she's not satisfied, she decides to draft a note. She's professional, she shows her appreciation, but she also says that she's disappointed, that she's frustrated, and that she really would like this decision to be reconsidered. She presses send in the message to her new boss, and then she turns her phone off for the next 5 hours because she doesn't want to know what that boss is going to say. When I spoke to her, interviewing her for the Good Boss Project, this is what she said a year later about that new boss. I'll follow him anywhere. How did we go from sending an email that was so daring, you had to turn your phone off, to I will follow him anywhere? She reported to me that in that year, this new boss named Brian pushed her, encouraged her, insisted that she have career development conversations that she wasn't actually asking for. was putting her in front of people that she didn't have exposure to in the past, was encouraging her to apply for positions, even ones that didn't report to him, because he felt they would give her growth opportunities. And by the end, she said, "I'm certain I would no longer work for this company if I had not been rotated into this position. That I would have eventually gotten bored and unchallenged. That much as I loved my old boss and my old team, I wasn't growing, and now I am." So in Brian and Letitia's story, we hear examples of what it looks like to live in that growth zone. And for the boss, who I also was able to interview, what it looks like to be the boss that can bring the employee into the growth zone. The last quote, "My gift is not to sell more software or luxury bags. My gift is to build people and bring them together," is a quote from Brian, Letitia's boss. So again, we're digging into this space where there seems to be, as one person I interviewed said, an unlock here. Something satisfying, something sacred, something that feels like a legacy that's available to those who want it. And yet we're not chasing it. So I started to think about this unlearning process where this ladder model needs to shift to being a spy pen model as an opportunity to rebrand what it means to be a boss. One of the best bosses I've ever had is actually sitting in this room right now. John Balcom, who's sitting up front, lives in the Denver area, and I haven't seen in decades, was kind enough to join us today on his birthday. And when I would watch him in the 90s when we worked together, in the last century when we worked together, I saw someone who found so much joy in the growth of others. That when he gave me an opportunity, when he offered me feedback, when he said, "I believe in you, you can do this," that I saw it meant something to him, not just to me. That yes, it was good for the business. Of course it was good for the business if my performance came up. And of course it was good for me if my performance came up. But I also noticed that there was something in it for him. And so when my students come to me, time and time again, I have this conversation with my students. A 30-year-old who's just invested in an MBA and is now wondering why. Because they're having this quarter-life crisis where they're saying, "But I want my life to mean something. I want to have impact." I think maybe, and for those of you who work in nonprofits, you're gonna recognize the naivety there. I think I should go work for a nonprofit. Or I think I should maybe go back for another degree in social work. Because they're imagining that is a place where purpose and meaning lies. The rebranding that I offer them is, please, if social work is where your heart lies, go there. If there's a nonprofit mission you can be passionate about and apply your skills to, please go there. But if you think being a boss and climbing the corporate ladder is a place where you cannot have impact, I want you to reconsider that. I want you to consider the ways in which you have more impact on adults' lives, on their confidence, their security, their financial status, their careers, how they treat their kids when they get home, than almost anyone else in their life. 60 to 75% of people say their boss is the worst part of their jobs. 60 to 75% of people say their boss is the worst part of their job. What would it mean to be the kind of boss where you're the best part of someone's job? That's what I say to my students. Because I want to rebrand this idea that you can't have impact, when in fact I think you must have impact as a boss. You do have impact as a boss. The question is it positive or negative? And in a world in which 60% of people are emotionally detached at work and 18% are miserable, in a world in which 40% of adults say they are searching for higher purpose, isn't this the ideal opportunity for us all to get what we're searching for? The sacred work of being a boss and the growth that the people who work for us can achieve. So what I'd love to do in thinking about where we take this next, in thinking about how do we chase what I call the growth high, is put some tools to this. Think about what it means to be sitting in, let's say, one of these. Not that any of us, the stats are pretty astounding, right? The majority of meetings are rated as a poor use of time by the majority of the people attending the meetings. Do you know who doesn't usually assess the meeting as a poor use of time? The boss, the person who called the meeting. So, that's a whole other thing about how to run a better meeting. But let's think about what are the tools we can use to help us step into rebranding what it means to boss, unlearn the ladder model, embrace the spy pen model, and chase that growth high. So, 3 tools. The first one is called the weight rule. I didn't create this. In fact, I haven't been able to track down who did. You sort of hear about it and read about it in a lot of different places. The weight rule, we're going to practice it. We'll use our spy pens again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story. And as I tell you the story, every time you feel like, imagine you and I were one-on-one talking. You're my boss, let's say, and I'm telling you this story. And every time you imagine that you would feel an urge to jump in, maybe to offer an idea or to give me some advice, to maybe something similar happened to you, you want to share your own story or relate, or you have some, redirection, correction, anything, ask a question. Anytime that thought goes through your head, just flash your light, okay? So and maybe keep track of how many times you flash your light. Most people will flash their light at least 1 or 2 times. Okay. All right, so here's how the story goes. So I've been working really hard on this client handoff, and I know it's really important to the company that we're really trying to get this right, and I'm really invested in doing it well. And I'm so upset because I contacted IT 3 times to get the platform set up. I didn't hear from them. I followed up again, and I'm just not sure where the request lies. And so then I sent an email to the whole team so I could get everyone on the same page. And when I sent the email, I CC'd the project manager, and then I got a really terse response that went to everybody, where the project manager said he's not the current project manager, he's rotated onto another project, and I've sent this email to the wrong person, and please don't send it to him again. And it's really shaken up my confidence, because I just already thought I was in over my head. And I just think this client handoff is probably, maybe it should be handed off to someone else, that I'm not probably the right person for it. So I'm going to stop my story there. Raise your hand if you flashed your light at least once. So I see a bunch of hands up. If you flashed your light, let's say at least 3 times? Okay, a couple of hands. So somewhere between 1 to 3 times is where our lights went off. If the microphones, we can keep moving them back, could I hear a couple of examples of things that went through your head when you flashed your light? Looking for the microphones. Yeah, go for it.
I think one thing was just to
be responsive listening. Like, oh my God, like here's how I would be responding. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, not necessarily a sentence or a comment, but more like, I'm with you. That sounds like a
Okay, you
lot.
would be offering that kind of like empathy, solidarity. Great,
Yeah, I'm
thank
paying
you.
attention. Yeah.
And active listening, you can pass the mic backwards, thank you. We'll take another example right here, yeah.
I flushed it whenever you were talking about that you lost confidence towards the end, and my question was, where did you lose your confidence? What
Oh.
made you lack that now?
Okay, so you had a question for me, thank you. You can pass the mic back. Take one or two more. Anybody have some advice for me or some concerns? Yeah, at the back, you can jump up and yell. Just jump up and yell. Okay. Okay, so you'd be trying to kind of tease apart fact and fiction. These are great, a lot of questions. Does anybody want to fess up to having a little advice or maybe wanting to reassign this client? What do you got?
I wanted to fix it.
Yeah. Wanted to fix it, wanted to know who sent this terse email. A lot of us in those moments, and maybe y'all are more skilled than me, but a lot of times I want to fix it. A lot of times there's things that I might say. Let's see if I can get us fast forward. I have an urge to jump in. I have an urge to perhaps talk, to bring the conversation back to me. And that's why the WAIT rule stands for why am I talking? Because maybe what I'm saying is in full support. It's deep empathy. But it is not them talking. It's me talking. And so let me give some examples of how this could work. So the why am I talking rule, the WAIT rule, is a tool that allows us to think about any conversation we're having at work and even in our personal lives. Is there intention behind the way we're engaging in this conversation? Are we trying to prove something? Are we trying to validate something? Are we trying to nudge something? Or are we trying to learn something? And so let's see how the second rule, the second habit, fits in with the WAIT rule. This tool is called the one more question habit, and we'll stick with the same scenario that I just told you about. And our goal here is to take the research of Allison Woods Brooks and others and see if we can add one more question. In her research, she finds that in the majority of conversations we have, we leave without having asked a single question. So what does it mean to ask just one more question in a conversation? So again, sticking with the same scenario that we just did, here are some things that people sometimes say they would interject with. When they have that urge, when they flash the light, here are some things a boss might say. Raise your hand if any of these things, sort of some version of this went through your mind. Yeah, I'm seeing some hands. Okay, so what we want to do to practice this one is see if we can take these statements and think about what an alternative question should be. So what I'm going to do is, let's do this at our tables. If you have at least 2 people at your table, this will work. And pick any of these and see if you can consider what is a question that could be asked that's a sincere question that's aimed at growth. So remember, our goal here is to help the employee enter the growth zone, because we as the boss are striving to help them grow, as opposed to leaving ourselves in the position of being the bottleneck where all the solutions have to come through us. Remember how Minji let Maya find the solution on her own. So the questions you want to be considering as alternatives here are ones that are pushing the growth and the learning and the work to the employee. So take about 3 minutes at your table. There's no like right or wrong answers, just see how many ideas you can come up with.
She now says rephrase these as questions, so it would be a moment of growth to the employee.
More coaching, less statement.
A question I do coaching every day. So a question I always like to ask is like, if you knew the answer, what would it be? Or like put it back on them to like zoom out and see it from, because they know. I'm always just trying to find the answer from inside of them, but a good one is like, if you would know the answer, how would you do this differently?
But let's work with the first one. Let's reassign the client for now, right? So does that guarantee really that the next client would be better, or would it?
Maybe. Let's see, like what could you do to help this client relationship be successful?
Is there a way to reestablish the relationship with this client? And maybe project manager had a bad day.
What steps can you take today or this week?
Okay.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
I'm going to look for the mics. Let's see if we can hear a few examples. If you've got a mic at your table, or if you've got an idea, raise your hand and let's get a mic right over there. Perfect. Almost.
Now?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
so I think before I would even ask the question, I would try and validate what's going on for them.
Okay.
To take down the defense so that then they're willing to answer my question.
Wonderful. And then what question would you ask them?
What do you think you could have done differently?
Could you say it again?
What do you think you could have done differently?
Okay, great. So you'd ask them, you put them in a reflective space so they could do some learning. What do you think you could have done differently? Great. Looking for mics and hands up there, go for it.
So we had some flips from here's what I do to asking, what do you think you should do next?
Oh, great. So put them in a position of agency and action planning. Love it. The growth zone. We'll take one or two more. The lights are bright up here, so if I don't see you right back there, go for it. But you have a voice.
Do next.
Okay.
We are next step.
So-
we also camaraderie.
Showing your camaraderie, but having them develop the plan. I love it. The growth zone, right here, last one.
Thank you. We gave them a parameter. You can't get off the client. So now what do we do? What's your thought on their next steps?
Okay, so some guardrails and then moving forward. Great. Continue to pass the mics back. These are wonderful, and every one of them would send them into the growth zone. Here's a few more ideas. And so the idea here is not that you don't validate, that you don't show empathy. Of course we do all of that. But what we don't do is validate and show empathy and take the ball back when they are fully capable of carrying the ball. Because in that moment, we're saving them, and whose needs is that serving in that moment? Serving maybe our temporary need. Let me give you, oh, sorry, were you still taking pictures? A lot of you were taking pictures. You done? Okay, good. All right. Let me give you a visual example of what I mean. 40 seconds, here we go. You can cheer them on. know you're getting worried. Yes. The growth high doesn't feel like a high the whole time. When we're having that conversation and we want to jump in, that's the moment where we are taking back the growth opportunity. The one more question is the chance that it may make us feel uncomfortable and it may make them feel uncomfortable, but it's giving them the chance to climb the mountain. The growth high is earned on both sides, and the tools help remind us that, why am I talking? Is this a moment where my talking is addressing this need I felt to save the baby bear? Or could I save them in a different kind of way? Could I help them grow? Could I shine a light with one more question? And to be clear, I don't mean every conversation, I don't mean every individual, every situation requires this. But what would it look like if we did this 10% more? What I've noticed is when I manage to even once a day ask one more question than I usually do, I unlock all sorts of possibilities in the people around me. And they look somewhat relieved that I've stopped talking. And so the wait rule, the one more question habit all set us up for our third tool, our third and final tool, the delegation slider. So the idea here is we're often told, and we heard a great example at the beginning about taking a should off our plate. We're often told that we should delegate more. Bosses are often instructed that they need to think about what they can delegate to their team. What does that mean? Well, for a lot of people, it feels like a paradox. You want me to delegate more, and that means I should do sort of what young Dolly did, giving everybody these micromanaged instructions, but on the other hand, I'm not supposed to micromanage, so I need to be hands-off. And yet the stakes are high because what if they get it wrong? These results matter, these metrics matter, the visibility matters. And so how do we walk that tightrope? When I teach classes on how to be a good boss, this is the number one asked for topic, is delegation. So let's talk about the tool that could help us. And it sits in how learning already happens on the job. The majority of people say that most of their learning happens through the doing of the work. There are formal training opportunities. You may yourselves be helping design or facilitate those. And there's mentoring and coaching. But the doing is where we learn the most. And so the delegation of the doing becomes a really important part of that. When we talk about delegating, we often talk about, well, I'll have them do it, or I'll do it. The I'll do it in the delegation sphere would be considered hoarding work. Something that someone else might be able to do that I'm doing instead. I'm hoarding it. Versus, I throw it your way, and I hope for the best. So it's a binary when we think of it this way. And then there's their cousin that comes in, the micromanaging version of it, where I delegate, but I do all the thinking for you. I tell you exactly when to do it, how to do it, what font to use, what to put in the subject line of the email, what time to call them back. I orchestrate the whole thing. The only thing I don't do is actually do it. What I notice is that most times, most people can limit their delegation possibilities to one of these three. And what I want to offer in this tool is a continuum in the middle. And in this continuum is where the majority of the growth zone sits. So let's walk through what that looks like. The idea is that we're looking for ways to both give people the on-the-job opportunity to do the task with the goal that there will be growth that will allow them to do it more independently in the future, and therefore take more things off my plate, but to do it in a way that meets them where they are in terms of their learning and capability. So one example in the growth zone would be not to ask them to do it, but ask them to look into what it would require to do it. So they're just starting some thinking without actually doing anything yet. Another version of that is particularly good when you're dealing with very urgent, time-sensitive situations, is rather than having them look into it, you have them shadow you doing it. They're not to do anything, they're not to say anything, they're not to communicate anything. They simply come to the meeting with you, or you give them access on the Google Doc so they can watch you literally while you draft it, or while you build the deck. And you say, right now, I'm not going to have the opportunity to answer questions. We're gunning towards this deadline, but please keep track of your questions. And I promise you, once we're on the other side of this, I'd like to sit down with you and go over it. So look into this can show up in a few different ways. Give me your advice, I'll decide. We're preparing this deck, this presentation, it's really important. I need you to give me your advice on how you would approach this. Where would you begin? What do you think would be important? And then I'm going to take the ball from you and go do it. So at least begins the initial thought process, and then they can see what you end up doing in the end. Explore, decide, and then check with me. Go ahead and put a draft together, start it off. If you're not sure what to do, lay out the 3 ways you could do it, and then we'll talk it through. Guardrails. Explore and decide within these limits. Go for it. The only thing that's really important, though, is we cannot have more than 10 slides. The only thing that's most important is there can't be a recommendation that exceeds this budget. So we give some limits, and then we allow them to go forward. So what we find is in the delegation slider, this opens up a range of possibilities where the opportunity for learning is there, but the floor has got some support to it. Can you think, and I'm going to look for a moment at where my microphones are, hopefully we're somewhere moving towards the middle of the room now. Can you think of some times where you have seen or yourself delegated that feels like in the growth zone, and give us a concrete example of how that worked in your particular context? If you've got a mic near you, or you've got an idea, raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. Right there in the middle? Yep.
One of the best bosses I've ever had, whenever we were asking for money for something, we'd have like a quick, maybe 5-minute conversation with him, and then he'd be like, great, put together a slide deck and a proposal, come back to me with the budget, and we'll go from there. So like, he would be like, yeah, I like the basic concept. Go do more research, come back.
Love it. Thank you so much. Great example. Right in the growth zone. You can pass it to the table behind you. We'll take 1 or 2 more examples. I've got one back here.
We're on now. We're doing some competitor research, and we gave it to one of our customer success team members, and he came to me, I don't know where to start or what to do. I'm like, you know our product the best. You know our customers the best, and our competitors, because they ask about them all the time. I trust you to go ahead and look at the features that make us different, set us apart, and where we're lacking. Go do it, and then connect with me, especially because our CEO wanted this information, so you got really nervous. I'm like, no, I trust you. Go and do it. You know more than I do. I'm not with their customers every day. I trust in you. Let's set some time for us to go through it together, and then we can decide the next things that maybe we're missing before we bring it to our CEO.
Got it. So what I heard in that structure was reminding you which knowledge you have that's most relevant. In this case, the knowledge of the customer is what the boss wanted you to lean on. And then the structure of, and here's the time where we're going to go over it. So don't send yourself into a swirly frenzy. Remember the swirly brain and the Minji Maya story? Because there will be a time when we will talk it through together. Great. We'll take one more example, growth zone delegation tactic. How it shows up in your context.
Robert from Dallas. One of the things I did, we were implementing new software, and so I gave it to my most tenured person on my team, and he continually came back with questions. So I reminded him, you're the most tenured, you know our products, you know how to set this up. You do it, come back to me with things you have questions. You don't have to ask for permission for every single decision you make. But if there's something you're not sure about and you have a question, come to me and I'll support you. I also reminded this person that he wants to go to the next level and be a senior. So this is now senior level work that I know that you can do. This is going to help you get there. Leading this project will help prove that you're ready to take that next step. And he's done a phenomenal job.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm sorry, I don't know where that voice is coming from. I feel like you all know. Oh, right over here. Thank you so much. So what I heard in that example was, and heard in all three examples actually, is a reminder to the employee of what we see as what you're capable of. So reinstating that confidence that you have in them and the high expectations you have, and then giving them space to ask questions when they need to. So happy to hear that they're doing an outstanding job. This is inspiring to hear all these wonderful examples that you have in your experience. So the delegation slider also addresses another quandary in the delegation space. What the research says is that men tend to delegate more than women, and that women tend to feel more guilt over negotiating. The mechanism underneath that has to do with expectations that delegation is viewed as an agentic activity as opposed to a communal activity. Agentic meaning it's individually oriented towards my own goals, communal oriented towards the group's goals. And then societal expectations of women are often, they're expected to be communal. And so if delegation is tagged as agentic and women are expected to be communal, I'm not saying I endorse these stereotypes, but this is the society we live in, then delegation is running counter to society's expectations. That's one of the explanations why women tend to delegate less than men or feel guilty when they do delegate. What's nice about thinking about delegation as entering the growth zone is it turns an agentic feeling activity into an explicitly communal activity. In each of the three examples we just heard from you, the boss was saying to the employee, I believe in you. In some cases, they were even saying, and this is the path towards the growth I know you care about. And so that communal orientation has been shown in research. Whoops, there you go. That reframing of delegation as a communal activity, as a growth-oriented activity, has been shown to close that gap, that disparity between men and women in delegation, which is a critical gap to close if we're to close the leadership gap between the genders as well. So we have, in addition to the growth benefits of thinking of delegation and the slider, we also have the gender leadership benefits. All right, let's do a little bit of practice. This is our final tool and our final opportunity to practice. So for this one, so raise your hand if you have people reporting to you, if you're in a role where you have people reporting to you. So that's maybe like 2/3. So if you have someone reporting to you, you're gonna be thinking about the people reporting to you. If you don't have someone reporting to you, you still can think about the people in your organization where you have some informal ties to them. So you're gonna pick one thing on your to-do list that perhaps someone on your team or in your organization could fall into one of these categories. Now, the first one is first for a reason, because sometimes we don't delegate because we think, well, I'm just not going to be able to do it as well as I could. I do not want that to be your criteria who you pick. I want the criteria to be someone who could do it 70% as well as you. And the reason I'm saying that is not because I think you should lower your standards from an A to a C. It's because time and time again, what we find is that people surprise us, particularly when they're people who work for us and have knowledge and access to different technologies than we do, that they sometimes surprise us with their ability to hit our expectations. So I want us to treat 70% as being in quotes, not literal. So think about someone in your organization who perhaps might meet one of these criteria, and what would it look like to take that item on your to-do list and take this person and configure a growth zone with them in mind. How might you be able to engage them? Remember, it could be as simple as asking them to shadow you, or it could be as much of a handoff as having them take a crack at something and then you give them feedback. Would somebody near a microphone be willing to share with us an example that you're coming up with? Okay, yeah, right over here, perfect, thank you.
Doing this in real time. I just got a note from my product marketer, and she's passing along some work to our ad development team. And there's 2 young women on that team that I've never worked with before. And so our product marketer has tasked them with coming up with some concepts for this new product that we're launching. And so normally I would probably say something like, looking forward to working together, or ask me questions, etc. And instead, I'm just like putting this into practice and was like, looking forward to hearing your ideas. Brittany, thanks for facilitating.
Whoa, this just happened?
This just happened.
This just happened. Talk about hot off the press. That's awesome. Fantastic. We'll take 1 or 2 more examples. What does this look like in practice for you? Who's got microphones near them? Do you want a chance to chat with someone at your table, come up with an idea? You still working on it? Raise your hand if that would help. No, nobody's looking for that. All right, then let's get some examples. Yeah, right here.
I don't really have a loud indoor voice, so hopefully it hears me.
Thank you for the mic. Yeah.
Okay. Hey y'all. I am actually reframing this. I don't have anyone who directly reports to me.
Yeah.
But I've had really great bosses. And I've been trying to understand why they were really great bosses. So, an example was one manager handed off managing a scholarship. Never managed a scholarship before.
Okay.
But she said, you have great organizational skills, you have great people skills, I trust you, etc. I was like, okay, I've never managed a really big budget, there's board members, there's donors. I felt way in over my head, but I think she really applied all 4 of these levels in the way that she was getting to know me. She asked me what I was interested in learning about. I was like, I want to practice more Excel. Cool, this is a great Excel moment. But she gave me the autonomy to both map out what were my ideas, both on the actual practical side of the scholarship, but how did I want to grow? And they said, I want to learn how to talk to donors, because that was intimidating. So I think she did a wonderful job in not holding my hand, but standing right next to me.
Got it.
Giving me the platform to say, you're going to lead this meeting, and I'm going to be with you along the way. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What's lovely, what's lovely about that is the one more question there was about what are you trying to grow in? putting the responsibility for thinking about what are your growth goals on the individual themselves. Thank you so much. So, we've got 3 tools, and in each of them, the trust factor becomes really important. So when you delegate, we often think about, do I trust that they will do this job well? Do I trust that they won't let me down? Do I trust that they won't embarrass me? But there's another element here, and it's perfect, the example we just heard, is does the employee trust that the boss will let go and let them grow? Does the employee trust that the boss will let them struggle their way up the snow mountain? Does the employee trust that the boss will keep looking and looking and looking with their light for what's possible? Now, this doesn't mean that if you have low performers where you've tried to see the light and you let them climb the mountain, it doesn't mean that there aren't times where there's just low performers and there's consequences to that. But I'm talking about the many other situations where these 3 tools become useful. Where, as Michael Bungay-Stanier, whose books I love, says in The Coaching Habit, tell less and ask more. Your advice is not as good as you think it is. I think the idea there is not to slam our advice as being bad, but to say that it isn't necessarily any better than the advice or the game plan the individual could come up with themselves. So we practiced 3 tools. I'm curious to get, if you had to pick one tool and one tool only to put to work tomorrow, let's do a quick poll. Which one would you do? The weight rule. The one more question habit. The delegation slider. Okay, it's actually kind of a third. Interesting. Great. So, to manage our expectations about what this looks like when we put the tools to work, the results are sometimes quick and visible, but often they take time. Often there's lots of takes before we get the right take. So, just like trick shots, where we see the final results on Instagram and it looks amazing, and then we find out it took them 8 minutes, 12 minutes, an hour, many tries to get it right. I'm telling you that to encourage you not to give up. If you try tomorrow the one more question habit and you don't quite nail it, or you try delegating the delegation slider and it backfires, it doesn't mean the tool doesn't work. It means we have to continue to fine tune it. I know, how wild are these things? You can make a living doing anything these days, folks. So, if you're worried about your kids, everything will be okay. All right. Sacred work. We have so many of us looking for meaning and purpose, so many of us looking for inspiration, so many of us hoping to leave a legacy. That sacred work sits in front of us, hidden in plain sight. The majority of us have people reporting to us. Those people are opportunities for us to use these tools, to chase the growth high for ourselves, to allow them to step into the growth zone, to shine our light, to use our tools, the weight rule, the one more question habit, and the delegation slider, to get us to a space where we can do the hard work and the sacred work of helping people grow. It will help the business, it will help them. But the piece that I don't think we talk enough about, the piece that I'm writing about and interviewing people about and now speaking about, is what it does for the boss themselves. We talked about Minji and how I imagine she had a good day that day. She really seemed to lean into that moment. But I want to tell you that that good day she had was a legacy. That employee is not going to forget that kind of boss. Just like I didn't forget a good boss I had from the 90s. That employee is going to remember that perhaps they will reverse the trend and why there aren't more good bosses. Perhaps Even though it's not easy, they will find a way to do it, to be in the growth zone and help others be in the growth zone. They will find the toolkit that works for them so they can do the sacred work. And then I hope you'll join me in the Good Boss Project, this obsession I have of trying to build more good bosses, trying to be a good boss, trying to be the kind of boss that will encourage others to be good bosses. And I tell you all this because it's not just professional, it's personal for me. Being a boss is sacred work. That conversation, that Zoom meeting between Minji and Maya, it took place in my living room. It took place in my living room because Maya's my daughter, and that was her first boss. And I remember meeting her eyes as she wrapped up that meeting and said, "Oh my God, Minji is the best." And I remember feeling a sense of panic, because I'm like, who's gonna tell her that not all bosses are like this? Who's gonna tell her it's only downhill from here? Who's gonna tell her that it's her job and my job and your job to reverse the trend? It's not easy, but we can do it. Let's build good bosses. Thank you.